Now, you're wondering how come this podcast was late.
I was giving you time to get the last one straight.
Check out past episodes of the Closer to the People podcast at ncblackalliance.org/podcast. That's ncblackalliance.org/podcast. I want you to think about something. Airports. Think about the people who work at airports, like air traffic controllers who aren't getting paid right now because of the government shutdown. They're being forced to come to work, but without pay. Now, how safe does that make you feel about flying somewhere right about now? And that's not saying those air traffic controllers would intentionally put you in harm's way, but you can see how an air traffic controller might be a little less motivated to be on top of his or her game. And I got to tell you, the situation with those air traffic controllers is a lot like North Carolina lawmakers telling public school educators to keep on showing up for work, even though we're not going to give you a pay raise because we haven't passed the state budget, even though we understand that the cost of your health insurance is going up. We know you're going to keep showing up because you love the kids. In order for government to be of the people, by the people, and for the people, the politics has to get closer to the people. I'm John McCann, and this is the Closer to the People podcast, a production of North Carolina Black Alliance. And I was sitting in the gallery of the North Carolina House of Representatives when House Speaker Destin Hall told the legislators that they dealt with all of the people's business they were going to deal with for the year. They voted that day to change the voting lines in the 1st Congressional District and handled some other business. But after that, Hall said, look, that's it for the year. He said, something could pop up, so stay on alert. But barring that, they're done for 2025. So they'll go back home and get ready for the holidays, do a little shopping for fun stuff. While our educators, who already do a lot, will stay at it, doing more and more with less and less. I needed to get a read on how educators are processing all of this. So I dropped in on the We Are Public Schools Summit put on by the North Carolina Association of Educators. It was at Central Piedmont Community College. Now, I need you to understand that I was hearing from classroom teachers that day. But when I say public school educators, I'm talking about my people serving up food in the cafeteria, right? I'm talking about custodians, mechanics who make sure school buses are safe, plumbers who keep the toilets flushing, all of the administrators from principals to assistant principals, counselors, and the folks who do payroll, who see firsthand that their co-workers are not getting an increase in their paychecks. The people in human resources who process the paperwork from employees signing up to pay more for health insurance with no cost of living increase.
Things are higher. Things are going up and increasing. We've just learned that our insurance is going up. We're already seeing effects when they switch to this new provider. Lots of things are not covered, or they're covered at a reduced rate. So more out of pocket, and it's just pushing teachers further and further, and the squeeze is becoming too much. That is why in Charlotte Mecklenburg schools, 49% of our teachers are novice, 0 to 3 years. So we can't keep teachers because it's very, very hard to make it and to survive. And, I always tell people if I weren't married, there's no way I'd teach. I couldn't afford to. And that's just my reality. My husband makes a very good salary and we do fine. But if that were not the case, I wouldn't be in the classroom. A very high-performing veteran teacher who gets results for kids. And so, I don't know where we go from here. It is hard. It is only getting harder. Recruiting teachers, they're trying to get very creative with, maybe you can work towards certification, or, you just got to have bodies in the classroom.
Things are different for state educators signing up for health insurance this year. Beforehand, educators claiming no dependents, and if they didn't smoke cigarettes, paid $25 a month for basic health insurance. Nowadays, it's salary-based, so the more educators make, the more they pay for health insurance. And you can't really be mad at the distribution of wealth, in my Bernie Sanders' voice. But the point remains. Health insurance has gone up for all North Carolina educators. It's a higher rate with no cost of living increase in the paychecks. And that's in a state ranking 43rd in America in teacher pay. Teachers in North Carolina make $13,738 less than the national average of $72,030 a year. Compensation is the number one reason educators are considering finding something else to do for work.
So a lot of teachers have unfortunately left the field altogether because they can't afford to continue teaching in our state. So we are absolutely in a teacher crisis here in the state of North Carolina. Not having a state budget, not having the teacher raises as these educators absolutely deserve has been a detriment to a lot of our educators, a lot of their families, and a lot of their lived experience. And so if the educator is not supported, if the educator is not funded in a quality way, then there's no way that we can have an education system that's actually educating our students in the way in which they deserve. And so that's why we're here advocating for full funding and for the support and for a state budget to make sure that all of the moving pieces required to have a quality education in the state are actually present.
In other words, if educators don't get what they need, then ultimately students don't get what they need.
I'm also the caretaker for my mom who lives with me. So not only am I trying to survive as a widow, by myself, I have to now make sure my mom's okay. And so the more money I don't get, the more it puts a strain on me. Me going to school strained and stressed out, not good for me teaching neurodivergent children or children in general. So lack of funding is always not a good thing because everything is going up. Food, mortgage went up, everything. So it's just, how are we going to survive? How are we going to cope with all of these stressors, added stressors in our life when we are needed to teach the next generation. The next generation needs our love, and we have to compartmentalize and make sure that we reach our kids, but it keeps coming back because I need to eat even while I'm making sure they're okay.
The level of quality goes down. If I'm a new teacher, a novice teacher, there's no Miss Vaughn in the classroom if we continue to leave at that rate. So you've got almost, and I don't mean this in a demeaning way, but you've almost got the blind leading the blind. How does the veteran come in and step in? I've stepped in to model, okay, here's how you deal with this particular student. Here's how you manage the classroom. Here's how I would deliver this lesson. Let's role play, let's model. And that support is slowly but surely leaving the building. If we're not careful, we are going to run all veterans out, and then I don't know where we're going to be. I don't know.
I think a healthy, happy teacher makes a better teacher for her children. She's less stressed out. If I'm less stressed, then I'm more patient with the children, and especially in my classroom with the children. So we want to make sure that our children are not just educated, but the whole person, so the entire child. So if the child is crying, I might need to stop and attend to that child. The child is hungry. Feel the needs that we were talking about, Maslow's laws. Meet the needs of the child. Now, my need is not being met if all these things are happening. And I just think like a lot of teachers, we go home after work and still do more work, and we're all stressed out. And I think it just makes, and a lot of just leave the field because, and the good teachers who love the children and want to do the right thing by the children, but the stress of not being able to provide, the stress of the job, and the requirements are so much more, the stress is so much more. And so, just having to make do with so little all the time is very, very hard a lot of times.
Organizations including Education Justice Alliance, the Center for Racial Equity in Education, or CREED, C-R-E-E-D, and North Carolina Black Alliance came alongside the North Carolina Association of Educators to help organize the summit. State Superintendent Mo Green showed up for a keynote interview. He talked about the need to focus on the good things happening in public schools, but he also acknowledged the challenges and spoke about his strategic plan, told teachers to hang in there with him. But I'm like, look, these educators, between prior leadership at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction to what they get in their school systems, they ain't trying to hear about another strategic plan and not knowing when it's going to materialize?
So that's the first thing that came to my mind. Like, we've heard this forever.
And that's very problematic, and that's why I'm hoping that he's able to work some of his plan, work with some legislators who support him and are supportive of his education initiatives, because there really needs to be some sort of a salary increase at the back end of education for the experienced teachers years 20 and up. And one of the other things that's problematic for North Carolina is North Carolina used to be a leader in salaries in the South. And right now they are losing with the numbers, with the teacher salaries for experienced teachers especially, to states like Alabama and South Carolina and Mississippi. What they're doing is they're giving blanket teacher raises for teachers years 25 and up in the sum of $2,000, $3,000. So the end of their scale is upwards of $65,000, $70,000, $75,000. And what you're doing when you do that is you're protecting the experienced teachers, and you're keeping that knowledge and that knowledge base and that experience and education, you're keeping that around. It's also harder to convince students to become teachers. I see students all the time with the personality and the intelligence and the demeanor to be teachers. When I talk to them about teaching of the profession, they look at me and they say, Mr. Hill, all due respect, you guys don't make enough money. And they don't know exactly how much money I make, but they know that I put a lot of work into what I do as a teacher, and they know that I'm not well compensated for the work that I do.
He seems like it's going to work this time. And so, with all the things that are happening, I'm just hoping that this time will be the time. This time will be the time, because he's also inviting students and he's inviting the parents, and it's not just like a bunch of a bunch of people sitting in an office making the decisions, but we're all included in the decision making. And hopefully that will impact the process more, and then the process will develop into something more tangible and make it for us so that we can all benefit from it.
Unfortunately, even if there was a budget, I don't get a raise because I am a veteran teacher. And what a lot of people don't know is that once you reach your 15th year in North Carolina, you don't get another raise until your 25th year. And then that's the one and only raise that you'll get from the state. So most people don't know that. So a budget or no budget doesn't impact me and veterans like me. However, if you do fall within the 1st through 15th year, that is a struggle. Being in Mecklenburg County, we do have a better supplement than the majority of North Carolina. I think we're either 3rd or maybe 4th in our supplement. So that's the reason I'm still even able to stay in the classroom. But that being said, not getting that bump when your pay is already low, I believe it's about 3/4 of the teachers in my district work a second job. So that second job already impacts kids, because instead of staying after for maybe 30 to 45 minutes, working on my lessons, looking at student data, I've got to run to my second job. And if people are doing that, that's going to impact kids.
So when I began teaching with my master's degree in 1996, my salary was around $28,000, if I'm not mistaken. Now in the year 2025, still with my master's degree pay, my salary is about $62,500 or $63,000. So my salary has basically doubled over the time that I have been a teacher. But the way that the state legislature has divvied out raises, they've not divvied out raises evenly. They've front-loaded the raises to teachers who teach like the first 5 years or so. So the starting teacher salary now for them is about $45,000. Well, the end teacher salary, they have not raised much at all. And so without a master's degree, because the state has taken away master's degree pay, the highest you can make as a teacher with 25 years of experience, the last year you get a raise, is around $55,000. So now if I'm a first year teacher, over the 25 years I'm teaching, my salary only goes up by around $7,000 or $8,000, rather than your salary doubling. If the state had kept up with the way they were doing it, as a first year teacher, their salary should top out around $85,000 or $90,000. And what's happening is teachers are coming into the profession, they're staying for about 4 or 5 years, they're looking at that pay schedule, they're realizing they can only make about $7,000 or $8,000 of growth over 25 years of teaching, and they're getting out of their profession. And what that's causing is a huge hole as far as teachers. It's creating a huge teacher shortage. And I've seen that in my school. We've lost teachers during the year, and we've had no one to replace them. And classrooms have gone without a teacher for the entire semester. I also see that happen when we have teacher vacancies in the beginning of the school year, and we really have a problem filling those vacancies. So those numbers are very detrimental to the profession as a whole, to public schools as a whole, and to the state of North Carolina, because it's really affecting the level of instruction that our students are getting in the classroom, and it's affecting the profession as a whole with the quality of teachers and the quality of education those teachers are providing, and it's just creating a massive problem in the public school system.
Brandon Lofton represents Mecklenburg County in the North Carolina House of Representatives. He understands the value of veteran teachers. One of his kids is a high school senior, but there was something so important that happened way back in elementary school.
When he was in first grade, it was his first year at that school. My wife and I went to his first parent-teacher conference, and we were very nervous, right? So we were worried what we might hear because our son, was very rambunctious, to put it mildly. He had a lot of energy. And so we were sitting there at the table across from the teacher. We're both dressed in our suits and trying to make a good first impression. And so we said, hey, how's Caleb doing? How's he doing in class? And the teacher said, well, he's smart, he's doing well. But every time we have group discussion in the middle of the room in a rug and it's time to go back to his seat, Caleb gallops across the floor on all fours and roars like a lion all the way back to his desk. So my wife and I are, we're embarrassed, we're mortified, we're apologetic. We're like, oh, we're so sorry. We'll talk to him. We're waiting for her to tell us how, she reprimanded him. But instead, she just smiles and looks at us and says, it's okay. I just told all the other kids, let's go back to the chair. Let's go back to our desk as our favorite animals. And that approach, that difference, made a huge impact on Caleb, right? Because he was in first grade, he was just starting out with school. It helped him feel at ease, it helped him feel safe in his classroom, and he's had a very successful school career because of that. That was how he started his school experience. And the reason why she was able to do that is because she had been teaching for over 20 years, right? So this was not her first lion in the classroom. She had experience with that. And so having that perspective, having that experienced teacher help lay the foundation really for his entire academic career.
All right, class is over. Your homework assignment: contact your legislators, tell them to pass a state budget that includes raises for our hardworking educators. Meantime, keep in mind that a government of, by, and for the people has to get closer to the people.